Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wissahickon. And look around me and you see a lot of green. Think back to, what was it, like February when we were all together, and it wasn't so green, and we took a hike here and I told you, hey, wait for a couple months and we'll come back here and take a look at what it looks like, and you'll get to see life in action. It was kind of dormant when we were there last. So where I am right now, by the way, is actually right across the creek from where we started our first field trip. So if you go back, it was the Bell's Mill entrance, and last time we hiked on the Roxborough side of the creek, and we made our way up into Houston Meadow and some other areas. Now we're on the Chestnut Hill side, and I want to show you some pretty cool things that are going to be like uniquely visible now that it's springtime. And also some things that are going to be what's called ephemeral. And ephemeral means kind of like it's here for a while and then it's not here. And so and a lot of that is in action right now. And then lastly, to kind of like warm up, I'm here a couple weeks ahead of when we normally would be here, and that's because spring just went nuts this year. And so it's, you know, it's early April and a lot of things are in bloom already. Still, there's a lot of things that are just kind of blooming their old normal time, but I wanted to look for these things called wildflowers with you, and I was afraid if I waited a couple weeks, I might miss some. So I'm going to do my best and point out some of the cool spring ephemeral wildflowers that we're going to see. But if you kind of look even like around me, and do you remember that stuff called lesser celandine? This is that stuff we talked about. That crazy plant. And if you look in here, check that out. These are all like mini potatoes. They're like little tubers that have a lot of starch, a lot of energy. And if you, this is that invasive plant that we've now seen, but last time we were together, we saw it starting to grow out. Now, if you like look up the hillside and you see it, it's supposed to just be a plant that only takes wet areas near the stream, but over time, it's made its way all the way up the hill over there. So every year it's invading more and more. It's another one of those spring ephemeral flowers, because as green as it is right here now, come June, even maybe late May, you're not going to see any of the leaves of the lesser celandine left. So we have that going on around us as we speak. Another thing, just to give you an idea of like where we are. So let's see, if you look out that way, I can see some guy in red, but it might be really hard to see given on our GoPro, but there's somebody going up a steep trail. Well, so across the creek and up high, you all walked that with me. So that's what we did back in February when it was kind of cold out, kind of rainy out, and we made our pathway across the creek, and that path took us up to Houston Meadow. So if you ever come back here on your own, it's the same location where you came before, and only I'm on the other side of the creek. And whereas before we did a trail that was considered the yellow trail, meaning the blazes on the tree were mostly yellow, this is the orange trail. And so you can see this trail marker over here is telling us just that we're at the start, actually not the start, but we're near the start of the orange trail, and we're going to follow it for a way, but we're going to find ourselves on a more remote trail in a bit that hopefully is going to show us a lot of spring ephemeral wildflowers. So I'm going to flip my GoPro onto my head, and then you're going to watch through my eyes what this trail looks like. Okay, so join me on this walk. We are on another stretch of trail that was done by the Mountain Biking Association. This is another expensive, designed specifically with hiking and biking in mind, and also things like erosion. So so this trail, you appreciate it more when you're there directly, but this trail is designed, for instance, right here. If you look over here, this might not look like much, but what do you see up there? We're gonna see some more of this a little bit later. That stuff that looks like cabbage, guess what? It's skunk cabbage. We'll talk more about it when we come to like an area that's loaded with it. But skunk cabbage only grows where there's a lot of saturated soil conditions. So this is a wet area, and you can see a wet rock, you know, behind the plant there. But if you follow down, you notice that water will drain here, and hopefully you'll catch this, but the trail over here, it has an area where you can see some water pooling. But now if I look back up and then I look over to the other side, in fact, I'll go down here for you. Look at what we have. So here we have culverts. Hopefully you're picking this up really well. So this is an example why a trail could be really expensive. They designed drainage through it. If this culvert wasn't here, water would head down from the cliff up above, pass directly over the trail, and it would erode it way down, like some of the conditions that we all experienced as a group. So that's what's going on here. This is kind of cool that you could see that they designed in drainage to this system. In fact, right here I can actually see, can you see this? Water's flowing. So this water is groundwater, nice and clean, making its way down, but it has the benefit of able to pass through underneath the trail rather than over the trail. Hey. So again, we are on the Orange Trail. The Orange Trail is the longest foot trail in the Wissahickon. You can actually pick it up where Philadelphia starts on Germantown Avenue, and then continue to walk it all the way through basically to Ridge Avenue, basically to right near the Schuylkill River. We could stay on this trail and essentially walk the length of the Wissahickon in Philadelphia. Hey. So on a nice evening like this whole pathway is an example of solace and serenity for not just people like me, but for these other people that we're passing. You know, given that everybody's cooped up, this area of the Wissahickon is quite valuable. Let me show you over here some nice wildflowers that started to grow. These are called Jacob's Ladder. That's the purple periwinkle looking thing here. That's a nice spring wildflower that's growing in here in spite of the lesser celandine. Right now, spring being a couple weeks early, or at least early in how it's blooming, is waking up all the animals. It's later in the day right now, but turtles have been out in abundance. Snakes are starting to stir and get ready. Garter snakes definitely. So spring has waken up not just the plants, but also the other animals around here a little bit early. If we were to come back here basically in a couple days, over here might not look like much, but there's these stalks of flowers, and I believe that's golden Alexander. There's a couple of them seem like they're just starting to show their yellow, if you can see that. But another good native plant that's beneficial to have in the along the trail here.
Quick fix.
Yep.
Hey. Hello. Anywhere you can find. So now we're going to take a walk away from the creek, and I'm going to take you on one of the really special side trails in the Wissahickon. So we're going to get off of the Orange Trail, and we're going to go on, as you can see by the sign, we're going to head this on what's called the Lavender Trail, which is a nice trail. It'll ought to have less foot traffic than the Orange Trail. And there's some special stuff that you often can see there. And plus it kind of gives you a feeling like you're even further outside of Philadelphia than you really are. So let's go hike up this hill here and see how lucky we can get with some wildflowers and anything else we might find while we're here. So here, you're seeing the result of a lot of tree fall. And anybody remember what this tree is here? The main one that you see falling down here with the light gray? I could give you a hint further up because we're going to see a bunch of these things. Or if you look in the background there, you see them still living. But that's that American beech tree, the one that people like to put their initials on. But if you look above me right now, what do you see? You probably just see sky. And so one of the problems in a forest that has a lot of deer is that the seedlings of trees get eaten readily by the deer. So when mature trees like this fall down, and sometimes what happens is one tree falls, but if you look around here, it looks like a little destruction zone. And that's not construction, that's like destruction. And it means that probably a tree or two fell, but then brought a couple other down along the way. And then what happens is it opens up this big opening. And so what that does is it, like what we're looking at right in front of us is Japanese honeysuckle, which is obviously not from Philadelphia, it's from Japan. And it's a nasty vine, but over here, because there's no seedlings, because the deer probably ate them all, instead of us getting like new trees growing back, because usually it's not a bad thing at all in a forest when a tree dies. It creates new habitat, and then it allows younger trees to grow in place of the older ones. But when the deer eat all the newer ones, then it allows for other invasives like this honeysuckle to come in. So that's what we're seeing here. So I'm going to show you something that doesn't seem very conspicuous. I'm going to try to show you some that are more visible. But the smallest spring ephemeral native that you're going to find is what's called spring beauty. So I'm going to try to get low and walk up a little here. But you see these, now that the sun is starting to set, the flowers close up. But if you look at the ones that are still open, you'll see what spring beauty looks like. I hope this is coming out okay for you. It's a cute little flower, but that's actually an important spring ephemeral that grows in these woods. So that's been out for a while. When I was out on a hike over here about a week or so ago, and I saw the spring beauties out, I said, uh-oh, I gotta do my Philly U class a little bit sooner, because if they're out now, other things are gonna be not too quickly or slowly behind them. And I wanted you to see some of this stuff. That's why I'm here a couple weeks early. So I've just gotten a call from my son Jackson, the one who like showed you how to plant a garden, and he's also my resident redback salamander guy. So is this visible? Can you make sure that that's visible to my
Yeah.
So the redback salamander is an amphibian, and besides being a real cutie, it's a good indicator of forest health, because unlike typical amphibians that spend their youth days, their larval days in a pond or in the creek, and then they have a metamorphosis into the adult form, the redback actually is born like a tiny little salamander, and it doesn't go through that phase. So a redback salamander does not have to go through the metamorphosis, which means it can survive without water. And so when you see salamanders all throughout the forest, that's a positive sign of forest health. Hey guys, you were welcome to be in my class video. So hey.
We're in enough of their class videos for the day.
All right.
Yeah,
Give me a chance to be a celebrity.
Not enough in the spotlight.
You do or you don't? I don't. Yeah, you're right.
Hello.
Hello.
So anyway, the point about if we see redback salamanders throughout the Wissahickon, that's a good thing. You want to see them, and unlike certain things like certain kinds of frogs, you can find them even in a dry area, because they don't have to get themselves to a pond to lay their eggs and then go through that larval stage while they breathe through gills in the water. You also might catch, if the sound is picking it up, there's some tapping against a tree, but it's far in the distance, and that's the pileated woodpecker. If you want to see what a pileated woodpecker looks like, I urge you to do that. Go Google its image. They're really, really cool. If we don't get lucky and see one, which is tough to be lucky to see right now, at least go check out what they look like. But they're not too far off. Over here, I just wanted to point out the new ferns coming up. This is Christmas fern, which is an evergreen, but you can see how brownish it looks. But those new things called fiddleheads are the new leaves of the fern that are coming up this year. So again, spring is really, really set in here. You don't see it in the trees yet, which is totally normal. Some of these trees normally wouldn't really go into real leaf formation until close to May. So they're active right now, but you do not expect to see leafed out trees on in early April like it is right now. Okay, so here's a cool flower that that's a treat, and it's called purple trillium. I'm not sure if some people call it red trillium, but it's a trillium. So you see that thing? That's another one of those really cool spring ephemerals. You can see its flower at the top. And in better days, trilliums would be all over this area, and there's just a few left. Again, deer tend to eat fresh green stuff that comes up, so so it's getting harder and harder to find these trilliums. In fact, when I pre-walked this, I could not find any of the great white trillium, which you should see in abundance here, and I remember seeing it in years past, and I'm afraid that might be gone, but it's probably only left in a few different spots in the Wissahickon. And as you can tell, just looking on both sides, there's no shortage of the lesser celandine just taking it over all the ground space there. Here's common violet, which is a really nice native to see. That purple flower down there totally grows at the ground level. So we have that in bloom right now. You can tell it's another one of those areas of pretty intense erosion on both sides of this little footbridge that we're on right here. And over here we have popping up another cool native that's just getting started. So this plant, if you're seeing it, the right one, with about, it basically has the spoke-like leaves, is called May apple. These leaves look like they're really, really new, just coming up. It has a cool white flower that it gets. If we might find it elsewhere a little bit further along, but over here it's just starting up in this area. Here's some more. The leaves look tiny, but but they get big. They look like kind of like umbrella-looking leaves, and they actually have a they end up making a fruit that that I know that box turtles end up liking when it comes out. So it's, you know, it's a glass half full, glass half empty thing. Here's another trillium all by itself, and it's exciting that we're able to find it, but it's not so cool that we don't find a lot more than these. But it's a beautiful, beautiful flower. But this area could use many more of them. It used to have them. Here's a smaller one coming up, but you could tell by the burgundy it was able to flower this year. So what do you see when you look up from me? Look down there. What abundance of color do you see? And then where we just were, and then you look up here, what do you see? So I'm sure you're able to determine the difference of the color at the ground plane. And so if you think back to earlier walks, what's going on here? So it's a product of the terrain. So we're coming to some steeper area. It looks like it's going to be a beech and oak forest. And look what happens to the ground cover. And that's really a product of moisture, because even the lesser celandine that we're still seeing here, we're going to come to like a point almost of demarcation when the green gives way to very little green. And then we get into an area of dryness. So take that in as we make our next set of steps. So here's where you can really see it go from, you know, a little bit of green left to almost none, at least at the ground level. So there's our typical beech tree over here. You can see a peace sign on it. Now, you see the thickness of that peace sign? Do you think it was that thick when the person who first put it there did so? No, because what did we learn? Trees, they grow up. Their new wood grows from the top. Compare that to grass, where it gets its new growth at the bottom. And then trees, they have secondary growth, which is what makes something a woody plant. And you can see that the tree has grown wider and wider and wider over time, so that peace sign has gotten really, really stretchy. So that's how you could tell that peace sign was put there a long time ago. So remember also when we were in the woods and we're talking about tree bark? I know from this bark that this is a kind of a birch. So I don't see any leaves on it yet, plus it's high up. But if you see horizontal lines on the bark here, they're the signs of what's called lenticels. It's a place where actually gas exchange takes place at the bark level. But when you see the horizontal lines like that, that tells me that I can either have a cherry tree or I can have a birch tree. This happens to be a birch, and it's probably the birch that people also call cherry birch, and that has something to do with the lenticels looking a lot like those that you find on an actual black cherry tree. Hi. So this monster of a tree, which is pretty cool, something happened to this tree while it was growing up, and one of two things happened here. This is either two trees that grew next to each other, and they sort of join real tight, or it could have been a tree that got hit by lightning or something early on, and then it branched again. But if you look up here, it's what it looks like. And if you think back to when we were at Lover's Leap, that area that's not too far from campus, this is the kind of tree that dominates there, and it's called a chestnut oak. And again, It's too early to see any leaves on it, but it has very, very distinctive bark, and hopefully you get a sense of how distinctive that bark is. You could tell that this is an area of relatively thin soil, a lot of exposed rock. Beech trees like it, they do well. If you can see the one over here, you know, the roots kind of provide support or buttressing on the down slope side of the tree. And so they do well in this dry soil. Just like the birches that we're passing, and just like the chestnut oaks. This, by the way, from a tree standpoint, is a really valuable forest because beeches and oaks have that all-important food source called tree nuts, acorns or beech nuts. And you know, the more of those trees you have in the forest, the healthier it is for other animals, because just about every animal in the forest will eat acorns or beech nuts given a chance. And we talked earlier, this whole area being a steep slope area would have been loaded with American chestnut had the chestnut blight not basically wiped out the entire species in the early 1900s. Hey. So this is one of those areas to appreciate the state flower of Pennsylvania. It's too early to see this in flower, even with spring being as early as it is. But we saw this evergreen in the winter, and we saw the same scenario. This is called mountain laurel, and it has basically what's called a browse line. So this plant, if it were healthier, would have green sprouting at the base, like you kind of see down here. But down here you can see that there's only a couple leaves left. So what do you think the culprit is that's been trimming the leaves off of this? And by now I'm sure you got it. It's the white-tailed deer that are in overabundance in the park. And so it makes these poor shrubs really not get to like make new babies, keep sprouting leaves lower down. So this is what it means to have too many deer in your forest. A forest that looks like this, hardly any green at the ground level. Part of that is dryness, and part of that is just deer eating anything new that comes up that they can get their mouths to. And so the challenge for a forest like this is, well, what happens when the big trees die? What happens when you lose all your mountain laurels? And then that's a big problem, where, you know, how does the forest renew itself if something keeps eating all the new plants that come along? And that's the chief challenge in urban forests pretty much everywhere, not just here in the Wissahickon. Remember, here's an example, especially the young beeches. Here we are in April, and they still hold on to their leaves, and they're just starting to sprout new leaves. So here's another distinctive bark tree. This is a white oak. So if you look up there, you can see the flaky looking bark. So that's the bark of a white oak tree. So again, you know, once you get familiar with these things, you're able to tell trees even if you don't have their leaves present. So here, coming up in relatively drier than normal soil, is a plant. And if you want to see what a jack in the pulpit looks like, go online. But here's the Jack in the Pulpit as it's coming up. The flower is actually in the Spathan spadix flower type, which is similar to the skunk cabbage flower that we saw back in February when we were all out together. So it's a really, really cool flower. I advise you to go check it out. And here's another one of the finer things that you might appreciate. Look at this. Does this pick it up? This guy, Taylor, I assume he was a dog, but is this tree showing you that Taylor hiked here? Interesting, eh? And this tree here, by the way, now that Taylor alerted us to it, looks to me like a cherry, a black cherry tree. So if you can picture or go back in the tape as to what the cherry birch look like, and here's a cherry tree, a true black cherry tree. See what I mean about the lenticels? So you'll see the similarity in bark that way, but you'll see less peeliness. There's been some graffiti messing up over here, but this is a cherry tree. So that's a cool way to contrast it with the birch, but you can understand where the cherry birch got its name. So the tulip poplar is the predominant tree in the Wissahickon, and the reason for that is that tulip poplars grow really tall, really fast. So these are two of the largest tulip poplars that you might even see in the Wissahickon, and we talked before how the chestnut, the American chestnut, basically went extinct from the tree canopy in the early 1900s. So which trees took its place? Those that could claim the canopy created, the open canopy created by the killed chestnuts. And look at the size of these trees. So this is an example of how big tulip poplars can get. But they have plentiful seeds. They grow just in one straight line up. They put all their energy into growing tall. And so they grow faster than just about any other tree in the forest. And that's why you see this big predominance of tulip poplars throughout most of the Wissahickon. But here's some specimens that are pretty amazing. So I'd like you to also make a note and look up what a plant called bloodroot looks like. Because before I passed some leaves of it and I didn't point it out, and I thought there used to be a lot more in this area, and so far I have not been successful in finding it. It's another beautiful spring ephemeral. It's really worth seeing, and I'm a little concerned that I'm seeing less of it this year than last year. And it's possible that the bloodroot will come out in more abundance a little bit later, because it normally would would be coming out like a week or two after right now. But given how far along other ephemerals are, you would expect it to be here with them. So again, not for sure, but there's a good chance that, you know, the abundance of deer, just like I had told you that there used to be white trilliums on this walk, and for the last couple of years I haven't seen any white trilliums. Now I'm not even seeing that much of the bloodroot that we would really want to see right now. So note, I'm walking on flatter ground, and we're back to that area of more intense green on the ground. Unfortunately, again, most of it being non-native. So we are finding the purple trillium that I've been seeing, and even the spring beauties are here, but they seem to be doing, compared to the others, okay in this forest. And another plant for you to look up if we're not able to find it on this walk is called trout lily. Trout lily is called trout lily for at least one of two reasons. Some people think that it's the speckled flowers that it has look a little bit like the speckles on a trout, and it also comes about the same time, it blooms the same time like trout start to get active again in streams. So which is it? I don't know exactly. Plant common names are like that, but that's the other ephemeral, bloodroot and trout lily. Ideally, if this were a healthier forest, we would see those two plus the white trillium plus the flowers we've already seen, and then we would be pretty okay in an urban forest like the Wissahickon. So here's a nice opportunity for us to see how tree roots grow, and also what it's like being a tree in the Wissahickon. So tree roots do not grow very far down. They grow laterally. And then in an area of erosion and you get some wind, a big tree like this can get knocked down. You can also see all the rocks that are intertwined, which is a product of this area being so close to the bedrock. So this looks to me like it was a really big tulip poplar that fell down not too long ago. And now we're coming to like a really fun stretch. So if you look up this way, you see a spring-fed, decent-sized stream. In the distance, I can see some skunk cabbage, but I'm confident that we're going to see some of that when we go downstream. And down here is the lower part of the stream. And if you want to get to an area where it's the closest place where you might end up finding a stream that kind of feels like you're elsewhere, like maybe in the Poconos or something, like a mountain stream, this is my favorite one in the Wissahickon. So we get to follow this for a bit and then see what that looks like further down. By the way, if you were on this walk, besides getting some nice springy smells through your nostrils, which is a nice rejuvenation of your senses, you would also feel, I just went from warm to warmer to right now it's really cool here. Like so there's these microclimates that you can totally feel. And sometimes you can feel them in a matter of just walking several feet. So the temperature feels like it keeps changing, and that's a product of moisture in the soil, and certainly it's a product of the water in the stream. And I just said before that this is a spring-fed stream, so this water is generally going to be colder than the water that you get in the main branch of the Wissahickon.
Good thing is I'm breathing this way. That's good.
Another thing to note about how what does the word invasive actually mean? The word invasive means what we're looking at. So I can tell you that if you came out here 10 years ago, you would not see a carpet of green like we're looking at. If you came out here 5 years ago, you would see green. It wouldn't be as intense as it is right now. So each year, the lesser celandine has been becoming stronger and stronger and thicker, and that's what is meant by invasive. Just because something's not native doesn't necessarily mean that it's invasive, but when something has the ability to take over like that, that's called being invasive. Hope you got your sunglasses on here. Getting this nice, beautiful sun, you know, getting ready to set in probably less than an hour. So get a load of this. Remember back to when we walked through that thing called the finger span. And then we came and I went down and I showed you guys what skunk cabbage flower looked like. And I told you that come spring, this whole area is going to look like a cabbage patch. Well, that's what we're looking at here. And this is not even like, this might be halfway into its cover, probably only like a third. So this is skunk cabbage. And if I skulk around here, I might be able to find some old flowers that are left. Because remember, these flowers came up, we saw them in like February. Some of them come up as early as in January. So they're no longer like throwing pollen out there. They already did their thing. And now in this very wet area, you see the skunk cabbage taking over. Just as I just walked maybe like 3 feet from the trail, it's cooler here. So this is groundwater coming to the surface. This is a typical reaction by plants, and you have this you have skunk cabbage that's going to like continue to get thicker and thicker. And as I look around here, I'm just being a little stubborn, trying to see if I can find a leftover flower to remind you what that looked like. But they might all be gone now. Also, if you remember, I kind of raved about the skunk cabbage plant because and again, if you don't remember what the flower looked like, go look it up. They're really cool. There's nothing else that looks like a skunk cabbage flower. But remember their strategy. First, They have a flower that kind of smells like decaying flesh. It lures in insects that like to eat that. Lo and behold, it fools them, but that's what gets the pollen spread from one stinking flower to the next. And then what happens, how did that flower even get there? Well, the flower has the ability to do a chemical reaction to make it turn to about almost as high as 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that flower basically has the ability to melt through snow and ice and set itself up for pollination on days that get above freezing, and you have animals that are like, you know, other flies and things that are out. So it's a pretty cool strategy. But what other plant do you know that can reach, that can heat the soil up in the area around it to 70 degrees?
Oh man. Man, you're getting me to starting to want milkshake.
Hi.
Hello.
So let's go get a glimpse of what this mountain looking stream looks like. So one of the reasons I really like this stream is this has a really nice bend or meander to it. And if you look up, you don't see a lot of erosion here. So this stream is kind of in an equilibrium with the land around it. So even though we get these crazy rains that bring tons and tons of like runoff into the streams, this area has held its own pretty well. There's a few reasons for that. One is kind of like the sinews or the curves enable the water to kind of like stretch out in a way and kind of like slow its velocity. And another thing that we'll probably get a better glimpse of over here is you can see some pretty big boulders. So this stream is also close to the true bedrock. So check this out over in here. Here you have stream flowing, you know, from, you know, this whole area. And so it really can't erode much. And another awesome thing about where we are, see those rocks that like, they have some orange staining on them, and they're mostly like a white. This is one of the areas, and where that little mini waterfall is, this is one of the areas where you get, it's one of my geology hotspot areas. So we learned that Wissahickon schist is the predominant rock, but this whole area right by the stream has this quartz substance that came up way back when this whole area was part of that Pangea or Gondwana set up when the continents kind of their plates banged into each other, and then what you had was like basically metamorphism taking place. The schist, remember, used to be mudstone, and the quartzite around here used to be sandstone, but then you got some of this quartzy material that developed, and we're seeing really nice chunks of it. By the way, like those long rocks that the water's going through are schist, but then you can see the boulders that are part of the bedrock here are and they're all around me. That's the quartz that came in later. Very cool stuff. And quartz is an igneous rock, whereas the rest of the rocks that we talked about are metamorphic. So hopefully you also can appreciate the sounds that you're hearing. What an excellent place to come, bring your journal, sit next to the cool spring or stream. And all throughout this area, I'm seeing next to no erosion. So this is one of those, think back to what was called Cathedral Run, the stream that we all walked down that was at the far end of Houston Meadow, and how deeply, deeply eroded that stream was. That's typical in the Wissahickon. But this stream here is holding together quite nicely. So if all of the feeder streams or tributaries in the Wissahickon were like this, the Wissahickon would flow a lot more clear than it currently is, because it would have a lot less erosive soil that washes in, because the soil can come in from two different places. It could come literally from the hillsides washing down, but it could also come from the from other tributaries that are eroding out their sides. So again, check out how this stream looks. That, I think, is really, really cool. Just wanted you to have another dead-on view of what this stream looks like. So again, if you just saw this and someone said, "Where are you?" how many of you would say Philadelphia? So here we are, and we're almost at the bottom of the stream that we've been following. But let's see how it handles these other grade drops. So again, another really cool, basically largely natural seeming waterfall setup that you have here. Probably a little bit of help from people setting some rocks in on the side. Gorgeous outcrop up there. Let's say hi to these two mallards that are feeding. How cool is that they're giving us this treat? There's the mommy and the daddy. Let's go see. Look at them just eating away. Look, they're even look how close they're letting us get. Hey guys, how's it going? I think they want to talk about raising a family. Pretty cool. Thanks for adding color to our class. By the way, if you haven't guessed, the green-headed one, that's the male, and the less colored one, that's the female. So here's another look at what this stream does. A really pleasant place to come out and hang. And compared to Devil's Pool, where we all saw, even in the midst of summer, this place is a lot less crowded than Devil's Pool is going to get. So now we've reached the bottom of our stream where it meets the Wissahickon. One final little look up. Another tulip poplar that fell recently. And this is back on the Orange Trail where we had started before hitting the Lavender Trail. And there's that way less healthy, slow-moving main Wissahickon Creek. Here in the midst of the forest is a nice stand of what I believe is blue lily. That's blue B-E-A-D lily, which is worth looking up to see what that's going to look like. Right now it's just the leaves, and the flowers will be here later this spring, and then they're going to make this very chunky, cool, bluish berry that you'll see, hence the name blue. So another interesting spot in the forest. The reason I can't get any closer, I'll show you when we're done with this, but that is bloodroot closing up for the evening. So those flowers tomorrow, once it gets warmer, they'll be more radiant, like a sun, and this is what they do at night to sort of protect themselves. The leaves even curl up a little bit. I can see there's a lot of it in here. If you get a sense, it's all in this area, and so like looking back, you can see that we're looking on the edge of a deer fence, and so all throughout here, so deer, it's called a deer exclosure, like we saw in a part of Fairmount Park. The deer can't get in here right now, and so here's an example of where the deer fence has enabled like a big population of bloodroot to come and be and not get eaten. On the outside of the deer fence, there's some bloodroot, but not nearly as much as on the inside. Again, like a most probable sign of white-tailed deer eating what otherwise would be growing here. So here in the accessible part of the forest is a fun way to see what's going on at night. So this will give you a sense, before it closes up for the night, of a bloodroot flower. And in this little area, you see all this baby mayapple coming up. Look how cute that is. But you can also see with, you know, you have some more bloodroot. This is what you would want to see all throughout the Wissahickon. Native mayapple coming up. So in this area is going to be loaded with bigger mayapple when this stuff grows. Also, like already closed up for the evening are the sweet, I'm sorry, beauty. Why can't I? What do we call them?
Spring beauties.
Spring beauties. That's when you get older, you forget some words sometime. But you know, so plants really move. Okay, a little later tonight, this beautiful bloodroot flower is going to curl up like the others that we're seeing. So this is one little section of the forest next to an edge of a deer fence that has a lot of beautiful wildflowers in it, mostly the bloodroot. But you can see, you know, this is a healthier ground cover than other areas that we've seen on this walk. So, sunset in the forest, at the forest edge. Very cool stuff going on here. Pretty soon, see if you get some guess as to where we're coming to. And I want you to listen to that sound. Just listen and take it in. We'll see if we get lucky to uncover the source of that sound. And I'm talking that high-pitched sound in the background. Just listen. So hopefully you realize we're in a section of Houston Meadow, which looks a lot like it did back in February because of the growing nature of meadows, which tends to be closer to the summer that they put a lot of their new growth on, but beautiful nonetheless. Hear that sound? It's getting closer.
We get in there?
Don't know. So we see water. Here's a hint. Down here starts where Cathedral Run starts making its way to the Wissahickon. But our eyes are focused on this stormwater basin that unfortunately has us skirting a fence. And a locked fence. So it looks like I'm going to need to hop the fence and be back to you and see if we can find the source of this sound.
There we go. Right, swimming in here, we got, check this out. We got a mating pair of American toads. On top we have our small male, and on the bottom we got the bigger female. Here's another one, another group. Hard to see as sun's finally setting, but they're all throughout a stormwater basin right in here. Pretty cool stuff.
So we have a male, a female, another male, patience has paid off. Thank you, Guy. So just a nice panorama of Houston Meadow just after sunset. Full moon in the background. Back toward the toad pond. And then looking in the direction of where the sun set. with, you tell me, is that Mars or Venus? Check a celestial map out to be sure, but that's a planet up there, not a star.